My name is Paul Kelly. I work at KO Public Works. I'm also a member of the executive group for the First Nation Housing Conference, and I am going to talk about project management. I know this is a subject that a lot of people seem to be interested in, obviously. So my first question to everyone here is, what do you know about project management, or what do you think it is in your mind? Anybody have any comments of what they think it might be? Oh, well, that's part of it, yeah. What else do we think it might be?
Studied at TMU, so.
Anyone else have any ideas? Yeah, some of it's to do with data management, because we need to have that. Anybody else have any other ideas what you think it might be? Yeah. Okay, so now that we have a few ideas. Oh, look, I hit that door out. So what is project management? So project management is basically the ownership of the project. So that means the First Nation community would be the one that would own the project. And it goes from start to finish. So you start the project. As I let everybody walk in here, that's okay. So it's start to finish. So that project, so it doesn't matter what time it starts and when it ends, you own that project, and you have to make sure that when you do the start to finish, that it is completed in that time frame. This is also where you direct your team efforts. So you have to build your team. So your team can compose of carpenters, laborers, a project manager himself, a project coordinator, plumbers, electricians. So you have to get everybody in your team, and you got to direct them in the direction that they need to go. What are your day-to-day challenges that you're going to have in your community? People showing up for work. Communications. I'm going to actually be getting to that one. That's one. Who do you report to? Who does? So those are some of your challenges that you're going to face on a day-to-day challenge, right? Submission of your key deliverables. So when you're doing up your timelines, which I will get into, that puts down to what are you going to, your deliverables are having your project, is having all of your stuff in place so that you can make that project go. So if that's bringing up all your supplies on the winter road, you need to make sure those are met. You have milestones, which are put in your timelines. So you need to meet those timelines. And of course, execution of the project. We need to make sure that we execute the project in a timely manner, holy geez, I can't even speak, in a timely manner, and that the project is successful in completion. So what we're going to do is we're going to define the needs of housing. So what is needed? Houses, right? That's what we're going to do. We need to do some strategic planning. So you need to make sure that when you do that, you have all your lots available. You have your water and sewer available. You have your hydro connections, as we just went through. So you got to be strategic in your planning. So you have to sit with all your chief and council and everybody else and your contractors, if that's who's coming up to do it, and you need to plan. And then the community planning. So you got to have community meetings. You should have meetings with everybody in the community to make sure that they know what's going on as well, plus your capital planning studies. Oh, look, so pretty. So some of the responsibilities of project manager is the project. Project timeline, establish and manage. So the project manager, he will establish a timeline, he will set milestones in that project. So if bringing up your supplies is one of your project deliverables, which it would be, and having it as a milestone, then that's what's one of them achieved. Once you get the base of your house built, then that's another timeline that's made. You have to also delegate your responsibilities to people. So you have to delegate a project coordinator. You need to delegate a foreman. You need to have carpenters. You need to have plumbers, electricians, all of these people. You need to make sure that you delegate them. You also have to delegate with the chief and council to say, this is who's going to run the project so that they know. Communicate. This is the biggest one. Communication for the entire project is key. We do it every day. We talk with our significant others. We talk with our children. We talk with people here at the housing conference. Communication. Let them know what's going on. If it's something good, let them know. If it's something bad, don't be afraid to say, hey, look, this isn't working. This person isn't working. Don't be afraid to communicate and say stuff. Execute the project. Execute the project in a timely manner. Make sure it's under budget. Make sure that all your deliverables, you meet the timelines, you meet everything that needs to be done. Monitor the project budget. You're given a budget. So you're going to put all that should be in a Excel spreadsheet if that's how you're going to do it. That's how I do stuff. Or you're going to use project management software. So that software you can put in your budget, you can put in your milestones, you can put everything, all your key deliverables, everything will be right in there. And then that way you get a budget of $1 million. You'll exactly know as you pay your contractors, your plumbers, your electricians, exactly how much everything's cost. You can break it down to by hour and everything else so that you're not running over budget and that you stay maintained in your budget. And then monitor the project. So the PM, he or she needs to go and make sure the project is running up properly. So they should be there on a regular basis, checking the project and make sure that everything is running smoothly, that nobody's off running around getting coffee, donuts, and everything else. You need to make sure that people are there doing the job so that the job can get done and completed on time. And you also need to communicate that progress to the chief and council and let them know what's going on with the project. Because if you don't, they're going to come back and ask you and you're going to go, well, I don't know. I was here, there, wherever. So you want to make sure you communicate the progress of the project. That's why the milestones come in and you keep people on that milestones. Some of the skill set that you need to be a project manager, you need to be able to communicate effectively. You should have leadership abilities. You should be organized. Organized is very key. You need to be able to have everything organized. You need to run stuff very smoothly. And you can't be afraid to make hard decisions. So if somebody's not working out, you can't be afraid to say, no, I'm sorry, you got to go. You need to have teamwork. So you got to be, along with communicating and leadership, you got to be able to work with everybody on that team. So your carpenter's got to be able to work with the electricians. You got to be able to work with the chief and council. You have to work with your project coordinator. You also have to be able to listen to what they say to you as well. You can't just blab on and say, nope, this is the way it's going to be, my way or the highway. Scheduling. This is very key. This is how you're going to make everything run. So from the time you start your project, so you're going to build 20 houses in your community, all your lots are serviced, ready to go. You need to set your schedule and make sure that you follow that to a T. If it gets delayed, you're going to have factors in there to have a delay. That is a given. Weather is one of those delays that will always be a factor. People not showing up for work. Now what do? You go get them up and find them. If they go out of the community, you try and find people that can replace them, right? Because you need to have that. You need to get these things done. Financial management. You need to have good understanding of how finances work. Whether you're doing hourly people, whether you're doing a lump sum, whether you're doing design, bid, build, you need to know how to run your financials. So I know financial things are very hard at times. We all have struggled with them. Doesn't matter who we are. However you need to do to use your financials, whether you use an Excel spreadsheet and put hourly, person's working for $25 an hour, how many hours they work, break it down by day, week, month, so that you can keep a running total of what you actually are using. Decision making. You can't be afraid to make decisions. Some of those will be the hardest decisions you probably make on your project. Could be from firing a person to just saying like, nope, we're not going to be able to get this done and we need more money. You got to be able to make a decision. And time management. You need to be organized. You need to know how to run your time. So in your time, when you're doing that, so in your project, you have a bunch of people, you need to know how to take them and your time and be able to make sure that you go to the sites, you go here, you go there, and you make sure everybody's good to go. You can't just be off running around and everything else. You need to be there, make sure that you operate on your time. You got to work extra hours, which more than likely you will. Don't be afraid to do that, because sometimes that's easier because you could be busy at the project site and then you need to put in some extra hours. So time management is very key. So 5 steps of project management. So initiation. So this is where you're going to define your scopes. You're going to do your budget, your timelines, and your goals. So this is when you do up your budget. This is where you're going to put in if you're using project management software or Excel or whatever, you're going to put your budget in there and you're going to break it all down. So your budget, then you would know who's going to work by hour, hourly, weekly, monthly, and everything. You'll break your budget down. Your scopes. So this is where you would define basically your scope of work. So your scope of work is everything that needs to be done. So your first step is to build the foundation. Then you build your walls, and then you do the electrical, then you do the plumbing or all that. So now you're going to define exactly what needs to be done in steps. Timelines, you're going to say if it's going to take you 3 months to build a home, you need to set milestones in there. So you need to have the foundation done first. So you're going to say that's going to take me 4 weeks. So once that foundation's done, then that's a milestone that you've reached. And then you move on to the next one. So you can't go from the foundation isn't completed, you can't put the rest of the house together. So those are what milestones are, and those are what your timelines and goals are, that you need to follow those and your budget and your scope. So planning. So you need to create an action plan. So what are you going to do? How do you create that action plan? You need to know exactly what you got to do. Execution, pretty well basic. Carry out the plans that you made. So you've made a plan to build a house, so now you're going to execute it. This is actually where the work starts. And then, of course, monitoring, controlling of it. So you're just basically going to go about the progress of the project. You're going to let everybody know how it's going, the good and bad. Don't just give the good, because if you just give the good, everybody thinks everything's great, running along, yoo-hoo, it's all great. If you don't tell people the bad stuff, they're never going to know. And then you're just going to be frustrated. The chief and council need to know what's good and what's bad. Just like the laborers, just like the electricians, just like the plumbers. Everybody needs to know if there's something bad going on. And then once we are finally done the whole project, then we do closeout. So this is where we turn around, we say, congratulations, the house is all built. Here's the keys. Now it's time to move into the house. And then you would start the whole project all over again for the next house. Or if you want, you can scope all the houses together. So in your initiation, this is where you're going to do your budget. So basically, this is the cost of your laborers, your materials, your shipping, because I know a lot for the communities that I service, a lot of this stuff has to come up on winter roads because to fly it in is just too expensive. Some communities, you have all year round access. So this is shipping costs probably a lot cheaper than coming up on a winter road. Timelines. How long does it take to build a home? Anybody have an idea? What do we think? 8 months? 6 months?
In northern communities, I've seen houses staying there for 2 years. Not occupied yet.
8 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years? Anybody? Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Providing you have some more band members working along with. For you to return, monitoring that. And the second day will be the building the front wall.
Yep.
Heating, and so forth. That's the kind of. And then the contract said, not going to come forward. And then that's where you, be notified when you're gonna have to do it.
Yeah.
$500,000
Yeah.
And sometimes they have their own nurse, electric room, kind of ease of all my responsibility.
Yeah.
You're dealing with what kind of materials you're gonna some materials or just cheap materials. Usually the contractor will cheap materials like four doors, house interior doors and all that. And sometimes where we find that they lack the quality of the material. And in two years down the line, they have windows that are condensating.
Yep.
Heating coming down because they didn't put enough installation or so because sometimes contractors you gotta keep an eye on them. I know sure they're constantly.
Well, a lot of contractors will. So when you get your wood from wherever you happen to get it from, whether it be Matrix or Spring Hill Lumber or any lumber supply company, make sure it's stamped properly. And if it doesn't, if it's all wobbly and everything else, turn around and say, no, get that out of here. I want good quality wood. You're building a home. It's no different than building a home anywhere. There is no way that somebody should be turning around and taking crap wood from the supply company. Never, never, never. Yeah. And it should all be stamped as well. Like your wood should be stamped. You should be able to see the stamp if it's like number 1 or number 2. You shouldn't be getting anything less than number 2, and it should be SPF and all of that. There should be stamps right on the wood. Yeah. Okay, where was it? Oh, timelines. How long to build a home? So we have varying answers on this one, obviously. Some take longer than others, unfortunately. Supplies shipped to the community. Like I said, you need to make sure that they're stamped. If the supplies are no good, it's pretty hard pressed to build the home with supplies that are no good. So then you got to turn around and you got to get rid of them. You got to turn around and say, nope, you're sending us $500,000 worth of wood. If that $500,000, if you got to send $100,000 back, you got to send it back. They'll compensate you. They'll bring you back the good pieces of wood. They just will. That's just the way it's going to be. Because we deserve the best that we're going to get. There's no way. They have better lumber. They have it all. They'll ship the best stuff that they can. And it's up to, as you're building the home, it's up to the project manager, the project coordinator, all of those people that are on the ground, the laborers and everybody that's putting it together to check to make sure that that wood or supplies are properly to the standards and to the code when it's being done. So goals, set realistic goals. I know that's difficult at times because not everybody can set realistic goals. So if we're going to say to build a foundation, it's going to take us 3 weeks, just say, for example, is that really realistic? Probably. But will it take us longer? I don't know. Could take 4 weeks, it could take 5 weeks, depending on weather, depending on a whole bunch of factors, right? So make sure that they're realistic. So if on average they can build something in 3 weeks, more than likely that's probably a realistic goal. If they take 5 or 6 weeks to do something, then you're going to have to move your timeline adjusted either way, left or right. Define the scope of work to be completed. So this is where your risk, your constraints, your priorities are going to come into factor. So your risk, how do you mitigate risk? So you want to try and mitigate all your risk. Make sure that you take away as much risk as possible that can come out of the project. There's always going to be risk in a project no matter what we do. There will always will be. So you got to try and mitigate that as much as you can. Take away as much of it as you can to make sure that the project runs smoothly. Constraints, well, that's just about everything at times. Priorities, well, life happens, as I like to say. So unfortunately, people that have children, they may not be able to come to work until 9 o'clock in the morning. So that's, for them, that's a priority. Maybe to you it's not, but for them it is. So you know that worker may not come until 9 o'clock. So you got to let them do that. Project team. So this is where you set up your project team. So your chief and council would be your stakeholders. Your project team should try and consist of a project manager, project coordinator, a foreman, or a forewoman, or as I'll say, a foreperson, however you want to put it. So that way, the project coordinator the PM should have a bunch of other jobs, more than likely in the community, could be running 5 or 6 houses, maybe even 7 or 8. Your project coordinator can be there and make sure that stuff is getting completed. Your foreman or forewoman, they can be there and make sure that the laborers, the construction people are doing the job properly. And if they have questions, then they can easily reach out to the project manager or the coordinator. And always, always have a project kickoff meeting. So bring everybody in, talk to everybody. Say, this is your role. This is what you're going to do. So that way everybody's on the same page before you start your project. Because if one person's off over here, this person's over here, now they start butting heads. Now you're not going to get anywhere, right? So this is where you can get everything out, make sure everybody knows their roles, what they're doing, and away we go. Yes.
Taking lead on the project was making sure like I booked Outlook meetings at least once every 2 weeks.
Yep.
Because I noticed, like, say during Christmas, you lose that momentum, and then we go back a couple steps because something has to be done within that project, and then you're facing time constraints. You're facing a remote community that has a certain time to get products into the community.
Yep.
So communication has been a challenge for me specifically as a consultant, but also there's also innovative ways of helping, I think, in First Nations. Like, I don't think we take enough advantage of innovative practices, like working for Indigenous business organization in town, and like Watane, and then also within apparel, working with this community specifically. Like, I come to learn that like they use a lot of tools like Basecamp, for example. And it just really helps the communication, because if you're not communicating well with your workers, like within the project, or creating that open communication with other people that can help you, then projects sometimes get put on hold for a whole year. Like, it's been really challenging. So I just think it's like, there's so much more to it than like understanding how to do a project is great, but then actually knowing that like the barriers that we're going to face every time we're going to do something. And what I found was like being able to reach out to those people who know specifically, say the land itself has to be okay. What kind of land is under there you're going to be building? What kind of trucks and stuff do you have available? What kind of workers do you have in the community? It's been, and I'm not working directly in the community, so there's that been a struggle with communication.
Yeah.
But it's really wonderful to see the project moving forward. But it's just these other things, like it's been nice to have more of a support system to understand other projects that people are doing So I just come to notice that having even a statistic, what do you call that? Like a database.
Yep.
For say First Nations housing specifically, just a database designed for all First Nations to access, to understand what kind of people we're working with. Like we said, a house can take 2 years. Well, what kind of contractors are we hiring? Why are they not being held accountable for the bullshit business they're giving us? We're wasting our money, our people are suffering, so, yeah.
No, I totally get that because I do a lot of projects for my communities too, and we struggle, right? It doesn't matter. Port Severn happens to be one of my communities actually that I work for. But they go along, they move along as best as they can for the remoteness that they are. All the communities I work for are all remote. So it's very difficult to try and achieve everything, and we struggle to figure out a database on how things kind of go. We're just not really sure. And chief and council change, so then priorities change for some people, right? So it's a struggle. It's a struggle everywhere. Some communities could be running just smooth with databases and everything else and be just all tickety-boo and, hey, we're doing great. But then they'll get that one snag and then they don't know what to do. Right? So,
Although it will happen.
yeah.
But then after that, it takes a couple of weeks to get back in the momentum, to get back into the feeling of wanting to work sometimes. Like it's really tough, right?
Oh, yeah. But that's why I say communication is so important. Every step of the way, you need to communicate. Setting up weekly meetings. If weekly meetings don't work, if it's every 2 weeks, then that's what you do. You set it up. People got to make the time. It doesn't matter. Our lives, yes, our lives are busy. Don't get us wrong there. We're not saying that. We all have things, but we have to set the time aside to make sure that our projects run smoothly. And if we're not setting up meetings, we're not going to get anywhere. We're just going to butt heads, like you said. Christmas come along, 2 weeks off, right? So now you got to get that meeting. You got to get the people back going again. It's like, okay, come on, let's go. We got stuff to do. We have timelines to meet. So you got to make sure that you keep everybody moving along. Even if through the Christmas break, you had just turned around and said, hi, how's everybody doing? Hope everybody had a great Christmas. Just a little hi, thank you, Merry Christmas kind of type deal. Just keeps everybody kind of going and moving and everything, right? So next, we're going to get into growth of the community. So what's the need in the communities? A lot of it's growth, right? Didn't have the power back. Now that we're slowly getting on to Hydro One remotes and everything, that's very key for a lot of communities, especially remote communities. A lot of communities run DGSs. So you're limited to what you can do and how many houses you can put up and everything else. So your existing area, are you going to use an existing area that you've already maybe decided to put houses on? Maybe not. Are your lots available? Have you thought about that? Is that the next, that's something that needs to be done, right? Lots need to be set, ready to go. Hydro. We just had a presentation on hydro. So now we know we have to get a hold of hydro so that we can get them to come in and connect and everything for us. Water, sewer. Are you going to use tanks? Are you actually going to be connected to a main water and sewer line? Or you have holding tanks. It's, if you have holding tanks, then it's a totally different way to hook up your plumbing. If you're on the main water and sewer line, then you got to connect into the main water and sewer and then run it to the house. So that's part of your lot servicing. And then roads. Right, you got to have roads to be able to access these lots, right? So this is all part of your planning. And this is part of growth of your community. So here's some planning considerations. So you got to do a capital planning study, and you need to do a specific and detailed planning study. So, capital planning study. Used as a guide for future planning. Used for development. Make sure that your planning is done for the next 20 years. I know that's difficult to do. Review what you have. What assets do you have in the community? Is there stuff that maybe you're not using that could be renovated into, say, an apartment complex? Right, for example. Make sure you develop the land before you use a plan. And when you base your housing projects, you got to do it on by the population growth. How many people know what your population growth is in your community? Does it grow by 10 people a year? Does it grow by 30, 40 people a year? Does it grow by 100 people a year? So you got to plan for that, right? That, you're going to have, maybe this year you might get 100 people come into your community. So do you have housing for them? No. So how do you got to plan for that for the future? And of course, financial availability. And then we need to worry about fire protection. Water, wastewater hookups, electrical hookups, your roads and drainage. So when you make your road, you need to make sure that you put in drainage. You need to make sure you have so that the water flows all the way. Because if it starts to build up, then that becomes a health and safety issue. Then you're going to have kids running out, they'll get in the water. Somebody could unfortunately drown. We don't want that to happen, right? What about your solid waste disposal? So your garbage, your landfill. You got to make sure that you have that to come too, right? And then, of course, residential development. So you want to develop all your residents. So also in your planning, you need to do your resource allocation. So you need to know how much drywall you need. How many shingles do you need for your building your houses? Windows, doors, hardware, screws, nails. Like there's just so much planning that needs to go in when you're going to do it, right? Your project timeline, you need phases, you need the milestones. So once you hit this milestone, you can say, woohoo, I've reached this milestone. Now you can have a little party and then carry on the next day or within the next hour. Congratulations, we've got this far. And then tasks, assign the jobs to be completed. Don't be afraid to be kind of hard-nosed if you have to be at times. So your overall plan, then, you need to know your scope. So your scope of work. So that's right from the start to the end. Risk management. Yes, there's always going to be risk in a project. It doesn't matter. What you're trying to do here is mitigate as much risk as possible. Get rid of it. So for the northern communities that I serve that are remote, the biggest risk that we have is winter road. The winter road season, if we can get 6 weeks, we're lucky. I know some of them are just starting to get open now, just to light traffic. So here we are at the beginning of February. Maybe in a couple more weeks, we might be able to get some heavy traffic. So we might only get 4 more weeks of being able to get heavy stuff up. So that's not a very good timeline. So that's a risk that we just can't do anything about. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what we try. That's what we try and do, right? We try and get everything up there so that throughout the spring and summer that they can do all their construction and building. And then when that time frame ends, then it's a complete start. You got to keep going because flying stuff is just too expensive, right? Quality, costs, quality. You want to make sure that when the equipment or the supplies that come in meets the code. If it doesn't, send it back to the supply company. That's fine. They may be mad at you, but you're paying for it. Somebody is. So you want to make sure that you get the correct standard of quality material. Time and schedule. This is where you set your time. This is where you set your schedule. And you want to make sure you have realistic goals at this time and schedule. So like I say, if it takes 3 weeks to build the foundation, that's going to be your time. That's your schedule. You make your schedule. You can't do, so the foundation, you can't put the walls up until the foundation's there. Once the walls are there, then the truss has got to go up for the roof. And you can't do this. So there's all your timelines. So everything's got to follow in place. Communication. There it is again. The biggest thing. Communicate with everyone. Execution. Well, now we're going to finally start some work. This is also where you report on the progress of the project. Reevaluate the project. Is the project running smoothly? Do you need to turn around and say, no, this isn't working? This is where you turn around and reevaluate and say, nope, it's not working. Now we need to go back and do something different. Keep track of your deliverables. You need to make sure that everything's gotten into the community before you start. If stuff isn't there, then how are you going to execute the project, right? And make sure that your deadlines are met. So on the progress of your project, you're going to check your timelines. You're making sure your milestones, everything is caught and going. Your deliverables, they've all arrived. Everything's good. Everybody's working. Your costs, you're staying within your budget. Now, if you're not staying within your budget, then you got to figure out, why am I not staying within that budget? Now you got to ask either A, for more money, or cut costs somewhere, which you don't want to do. You don't want to cut costs. Reports. So usually if you're sending reports to ISC or to whoever, Reports Ontario, you need to make sure those are sent in a timely fashion. So that's a project manager's job, or they can give it to the project coordinator. But you got to make sure those reports are put in a timely manner. Just like reporting to the chief and council, which are your stakeholders. You want to make sure that you report to them in a timely manner. So that way they know if something's going wrong, that they know that they can maybe help you fix it or help that, whatever the problem may be. So you want to make sure you do that. The biggest thing again, communication. I'll probably say that one for about 1 million times, just so everybody knows. Communication is the key to everything that we do, right?
Slide.
Yep.
Deadlines.
Okay.
This morning we were in a contract discussion and then there was a little debate on penalties. Do you see penalties a lot in your plans or?
Funding can get held back, right? If you don't do your reports and returns.
Not necessarily on the reports.
Yeah.
On the actual work in the program.
I haven't really seen much of that, just because kind of once people kind of go, mind you, we just had that happen to us not too long ago, but there is, in the contract, when you write it out, you're going to put, like, if you don't have this done, there's going to be a penalty, and that's what your 10% holdback usually is for too, right? To hold on. So if they don't meet something within that contract, then they're going to turn around and say, okay, you're not getting your 10% holdback, because most contracts are usually a fair size, right, for building a home. Answer your question, or?
Yeah.
So when we go to reevaluate the project, is the project on time? Is the project within the scope? And is it still the same? Are we on budget? Is there room for improvements? So this is where you're communicating with all your people and going, okay, is there room for improvements here? Can we do something better? Can we streamline something? If it's not working out well, then don't be afraid to say, nope, it's not working. Let's move on to try something different. This is where communication is very important. And are we successful? Are we successful in doing what we're doing? If we're not, then what's going to make us successful in the project? So when we go to monitoring, there it is again, communicate. So you need to communicate with the team. Is everything going well? Project coordinator may have a question. The foreperson may have a problem. The laborer may have a problem, the electrician, everyone. So the project manager also has to try and solve the problems that may arise. Whatever those problems may be, they got to try and solve them. If they can't solve them, then ask for help. Report the progress of the project and what's the team status. How's everybody making out? So now we get into health and safety. So everybody has responsibilities for health and safety. It doesn't matter who, what, where, when, why, how. So the contractor has responsibilities, the laborers, the First Nation has responsibilities, the subcontractors, the project manager, the coordinator, everybody. Assess the risks. What risks are there? If you don't wear, say, the proper PPE, and you accidentally step on a nail and goes through your shoe, well, because you didn't wear the proper steel-toed boots or whatever, now that nail goes through, goes into your foot. Now what do? Who's at fault for that? Is that your fault? Because you didn't wear the proper PPE? Or is it the First Nations? Is it the project managers, the coordinators? So you got to assess those risks to make sure that everything's there. Supervisors. What's the expectations for supervisors? Site meetings. Review the safety standards. So you're always going to have all these safety standards in place. So everybody that goes to the project site, you must wear a hard hat if you need required. You must have on a safety vest. You must have on steel-toed boots to go to the site. Four-person safety meetings, toolbox talks, training. If you're not up to date on training, make sure that you take the appropriate training so that you're up to date with everything that's going on. Laborers, required PPE, 10 tool talk boxes, properly trained. Well, I guess I better speed it up here. So the roles and responsibility, chief and council, they're the stakeholders. Your suppliers, people who are supplying you all the supplies, windows, doors, wood, lumber, all of it. Housing, your project manager. So basically, they're going to be the ones that should be running the project in your community. Contractors, subcontractors, what are their roles? What are their responsibilities when they come to the community? Carpenters, laborers, you have all of that. So there's a whole bunch of roles and responsibilities, and they need to be spelled out in the simplest terms, if that's what you have to do, but they need to be spelled out so that everybody knows what the roles and responsibilities are for everybody. And everybody should know everybody's roles and responsibilities. So the stakeholders, the project manager should know the responsibilities of them. Everybody should know everybody's roles and responsibility. Because you don't know, you could be taking on that role or responsibility one day because somebody's out. So you want to make sure you know those roles and responsibilities. Policies. So what's your employee policy on your First Nation community? Do you need to hire, say, 10 workers that are first from the community itself? So you need to do that. The vendors. What's the housing policy if you have one in place? Contractors, what are their policies? And tendering. What's your tendering process? This should be spelled out so that you know when you go to do your tendering process that you know exactly what you want to come out with. So the types of construction you can have manufactured. So basically your manufactured homes are from North Fab or any of those. They're all manufactured. They're all set, ready to go. Just haul them up on the road, plop them in place, and away we go. Stick built, as I like to call it. That's where you start from ground zero and work your way up. So now there's panels. So there's SIP, which is structured insulated panels, hempcrete, which is new and slowly starting to come in. I know they built them in BC, they've used them. And I think they're slowly starting to be used in a few other places. They seem to be pretty solid. There's a whole bunch of new ways of doing new panels and everything else out there. I've did some research on that. And then you have insulated concrete forms, and then of course modular construction. Plans and drawings. So you want to make sure you have a complete set of your plans and drawings. Make sure that you get an architect or an engineer. Lumberyard supplier can do design plannings, and they do for your homes. I've seen those, but they need to be stamped too. They can't just be Joe Blow off the street, right? Sitting there and goes on AutoCAD, does up your little plan and says, oh yeah, here we go. Take this and build it. No, should be stamped. Designer certified, just like I said right there. And other engineering firms, because you want to make sure that you have certified engineered drawings. Codes. So when we get into codes, you want to make sure that you use the Ontario Building Code, provided you're in Ontario. If not, use the National Building Code. Electrical Safety Authority, so you have the ESA, make sure that you use them. That's what they're there for, right? They're there to make sure that all of our electrical stuff is done properly. Canadian Standard Association. Wet, so anybody that's going to do any wood heating or anything like that, you need to use wet. And so then for your HVAC, you need an HVAC qualified person to do your HVAC, your HRVs, your HRA systems. So make sure that you get that the codes are completely followed. Agreements. So you're going to have legal agreements. So you want to review and review and agreements. That's not very good. Contracts. So are you going to do a lump sum contract? Are you going to do a tender? You're going to send it out to tender. So if you send it out to tender, you want to make sure that contract is stipulated in there of whether that tender is going to be invited or whether it's going to be a closed one, just sole source, that you just use that one person. Then you have design bid build, PM, and your supervisors. Insurance. You want to make sure that you have your contractors, that they give you your insurance. First Nation communities need to make sure that they have insurance as well. Security. Who does security for the contractors when they're in the community? What about the subcontractors? Because the contractors are going to have subcontractors, and not necessarily will they be there at that specific job at that specific time. They could be off somewhere else. What about site security? Are you putting up fences around there? Are you going to have somebody on site? Are you going to have somebody patrolling by? You never know what can happen, right? In the community. Drawings and plans. You need to have the site layout. Door and window schedule. Floor plans, the layouts. You may want one bedroom down here on this side of the house, and you may want two over this way, or you may want your kitchen this way, or who knows? So you want to make sure that you have a specific layout. Section details. You need to know the roof, the walls, the floors, all of that stuff. You need to have that all detailed out for you. Your structural details, specifications, if there's any specific or general specifications that are in there. So that could be for your HRV, that it needs to be specifically here. It could be for your wood stove. If it's not 30 inches from the wall, if you're not using a panel or anything, then it's got to be done the specific way. You need to know about your electrical. I just touched on HVAC. Plumbing, what are your plumbing plans? So the plumbing's got to come in. So, and then it's got to run to the bathroom, and it's got to go for your laundry, your sump pumps, all of that stuff. That's all part of your plumbing. Your trusses. So when your trusses go up after you've built your walls, there's going to be a truss plan so that you know exactly how much snow load they can handle, the wind, the rain, like all of this stuff. There's always going to be all that stuff on those too. Attic ventilation. What are you going to do to ventilate your attic? Floor joists. So you have lots of those. So what's the load for those? Dead load. Other specifications. So you got your ICF, your SIP, and your hempcrete. Your project agreements, whether you sole source, whether you tender it out, invited public, cost plus, your design, bid, build. So a design, bid, build is basically you get somebody to design it, they bid on it, and then they build it. That's what a design, bid, build is. I know, I'll go faster. No. Contracts. So your contracts, they got to be a written agreement. Can be voluntary, deliberate. They should need to be competent, legal obligation, and they are enforceable in court, just so everybody knows. So if there is a problem with your contract or your agreement, it can go to court. On your closeout, this is where you're going to finalize the project, the good and bad of the project. You're going to check your deliverables. Everything's been done. Everything's good to go. This is where you kind of hand over the keys to the chief and council, your stakeholders, and say, congratulations, now you own a new house. Thank you. My name is Paul Kelly. I'm the project technologist at KO Public Works.